Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Beef Upfront podcast here on Pick Swap Media. Your host, Ryan Coyle, as always, back with a little bit of college football recap. Big past week. We're going to do our weekly show here of 10 things that we learned from the past week in college football. And then do a little look ahead as well to this upcoming week, which I've anointed Holy Grail week. You have Ohio State, Oregon, Kansas State, Colorado, Texas, Oklahoma, Florida, Tennessee, big game after big game after big game, huge week, Penn State, USC. But we can't look forward to next week until we look back at last week and the chaos that ensued. As always, we'll run through our top 10 things that I kind of took away from the week. And number one is just a broad kind of view of college football. And it really is just kind of buckle up, chaos is here. And last weekend, I don't think it is the end of it. And what we saw with Vanderbilt beating freaking Alabama. I'm 25 years old, and I never thought I would see the day that happened. Arkansas over Tennessee was a pretty big upset, too. A 14-point favorite was Tennessee in that one. Minnesota over USC. Major chaos. And we went into the week saying, I think it was 9 of the top 25 teams were playing on the road this past week. So you knew some upsets were going to occur, but I don't think anyone saw Vandy over Alabama, especially coming off that Georgia win. Sure, maybe they came out and started slow, but at the end, obviously, Alabama takes over, takes full control. But they never were really able to do that. I mean, I was just listening to something, and A.J. McCarron, former Alabama quarterback, was saying himself, like, Vanderbilt was doing what they wanted at the line of scrimmage. They were running the same play. They were running it left. They were running it right. And it was just kind of which way they wanted to go, and they had the ability to do it. And it's not like it was a fluke, a 13-10 game, multiple pick sixes or special teams touchdowns. They were having their way with Alabama. And I think that is my biggest takeaway this college football season so far. Kirby Smart talked about it at the beginning of the year and in the offseason, where it was like, with the portal now and NIL, if you have guys that are just sitting there not playing, 4 or 5-star guys, and they don't want to wait their turn, they're headed out the door and getting a paycheck and going a chance to get an opportunity to go and play right away somewhere else. You don't have these Georgia squads that we saw recently or back in prime kind of Nick Saban days where they were just stacking 4 and 5-star guys. They would sit for a year or two, and then when it was their turn to play, they were ready to go and just keep the train rolling. We don't see that anymore, and the depth of these rosters has been hurt, and I think that makes for more chaos. Like, it's not as steep of a cliff from Alabama to Vanderbilt anymore. And I'm not saying that I'm expecting Vanderbilt now to be competing for SEC championships, 9-10 wins. No, I'm not saying that. Still expect, obviously, Alabama to be in that regard. But it's not going to be as crazy when you see crazy upsets like we did on Saturday. I mean, Arkansas has been a pretty damn good team this year. I think they've been disrespected a little bit. They coughed up a game at Oklahoma State that they should have won. That could be a top 15 team right now if they had won that game, especially with the win over Tennessee. But look at Tennessee too. They've been hyped up to the highest extent. We've talked about them multiple times as a potential national title team, and they go and fall flat on their face. And I mean, it might be time to pump the brakes a little bit on Tennessee. Like, Nico is a fun, exciting player. You see the talent. And this was my major take with him coming into the season. He's a first-year starting quarterback in the SEC. He's going to take his bumps and bruises, but he's only thrown for more than 200 yards in 2 games. One of them was against Chattanooga, and the one was against NC State. He's thrown for 173, 194, and 158. He hasn't been putting up exactly electric, fully exciting numbers, and that was the expectation with him going to Heupel, that would be the offense that puts up 45, 50 points a game on every given week. We haven't really seen that to the fullest extent yet, and they go out there and they lose a dogfight to Arkansas 19-14. So, we're seeing these bottom tier, middle tier kind of teams being able to hang around and win these games. I mean, even Minnesota beating USC. My big take on USC coming into the year, I don't think that roster, and I don't think the coaching system, the style of coaching that we've seen out of Lincoln Riley has really bred and had born tough teams, physical teams. You go play a Minnesota team that you're much more talented than, but at the line of scrimmage, they're able to push you around, and they're just a tougher team than you in USC, and that's their downfall. So, we're going to see a lot more upsets more and more. It makes you kind of wonder, too, as we get closer and closer to the playoff, like, are some of these good teams, like better teams that we have in our eyes, 2-3 losses, going to get left out for like a 11-1 Indiana or an 11-1 Syracuse? You see one of those, and then you see like a 9-3 Tennessee or a 9-3 Alabama on the outside looking in. I think it's really fascinating, and we're about halfway through the season now. Sad to say for for teams in their regular season games, but we're going to see a lot more chaos over these next X amount of weeks, but before we get to conference titles and to the playoffs. But I'm just saying right now, buckle up because it's here and it doesn't look like it's slowing down anytime soon. All right, our second point of the week, going to go back to Friday night. Watch the first half of this game, called it an early night because I didn't think my bet was looking too great. Check the box score, though, and check all his stats. Kyle McCord's a baller, man. I mean, he's having a great year. I think he kind of got the raw end of the deal last year at Ohio State. He was kind of looked at as the reason why that they weren't able to beat Michigan, be able to win, go to the playoff, be a national title team. He kind of got a raw end of the stick there. But he's gone to Syracuse and has made really the most of his second opportunity. On Friday night, 44-41 win in overtime at UNLV, number 25 in the country, 40 for 63, 355 yards, 3 touchdowns, an interception. Turns the ball over a little bit, 6 interceptions, but with the amount of times that they haven't thrown the ball, 63, 50, 42, 46, 39, they have him going out there and dropping back pretty much every snap. They don't have much of a running game in there right now, but he's going out there and he's playing really well. He's really made the most of his opportunity, and he's a damn good pocket quarterback, a lot of zip on his passes. And it's a Syracuse team that, you look at their schedule coming up, they have a very – I'm not going to say easy path, but a very realistic path if he continues to play like that and the offense continues to score the way that they've been scoring. That could be a 10-win team maybe. And who knows, flirt with 11 wins, you might find yourself in the college football playoff. You got at NC State this week, who's been a down team, at Pitt, who's a surprise team this year, Virginia Tech, at BC, at Cal, versus UConn and versus Miami. None of the games on that schedule you're like guaranteed pencil and loss, and they're sitting here at with one loss so far, 4-1. Who knows? And I think Kyle McCord's a guy that he continues to put up these numbers in this wacky college football season that we've seen so far. That currently has the Boise State running back, a Colorado player that plays 2 sides of the field, and the Miami quarterback right now is the 3 leading guys in the Heisman. Kyle McCord continues to go put up numbers, and they go 10-2, 11-1. He's going to have a conversation to be in New York at the end of the day as well. So Kyle McCord and his second chance at Syracuse has been a really eye-popping performance, and hats off to him. It's kind of easy to cower away after getting shut out and shut away from your favorite school, the school that you grew up wanting to go to, and now he gets second life at Syracuse, and he certainly has made the most of it. So I think that's one of the best stories of the year so far in college football. Story number 3, we will stay in the ACC and we will go to the University of Miami. Just an awesome, epic comeback win that doesn't end until 2:30 in the morning Eastern time. 39-38, they come back. They're down as much as 35-10 with 8 minutes to go in the third quarter. But the point that we're talking about here is Cam Ward is that dude. I think it was not talked about enough how good of a player he was because he played at Incarnate Word and then he played at Washington State. Not many people are staying up and watching those games. Now he's getting the chance to do it on a national stage, seems like each and every week now at Miami. And, that's a huge comeback win. I think it might have a little bit more to say that Miami's not as legit as the 6-0 record might indicate. But so this is a team that has guts, and with Cam Ward playing at the quarterback spot, they're never out of it. I mean, 35 of 53 for 437 yards and 2 touchdowns. He rushes a touchdown in as well. He's a fun and electric playmaker in a pretty weak ACC. My preseason prediction was that Miami would go undefeated in the regular season and win the ACC. I think that still certainly, lives to see another day and has a good chance of potentially hitting. But Cam Ward really is that guy, and he continues to play like this, put up these numbers. He's going to be in the conversation for the Heisman for sure, but maybe even the number 1 pick in the NFL draft. A super fun player to watch, and I'm glad he's finally getting the national stage week in, week out, because I do think he's one of, if not the best overall quarterback in all of college football. Number 4, Missouri. Most overhyped team from the offseason. I certainly would put that, on one of my preseason expectations for what I expected from them. I thought this was an 11-1 team. They sit here still at 4-1, but you argue they could have lost to Vanderbilt, where Vanderbilt just beat Alabama, so maybe Vanderbilt is pretty good, but still it's Vanderbilt. Squeaked out a win against Boston College, who's going to be, I think, like a 7-5, 8-4 team by the end of the year. But then they go and get absolutely rolled at Texas A&M, 41-10, their first, I think, major test of the year. Now they have at UMass versus Auburn, at Alabama versus Oklahoma, at South Carolina, at Mississippi State versus Arkansas. Reason why I love them coming in the year, obviously bringing back Brady Cook, Eli Drinkowitz at head coach, your quarterback with Cook, and then wide receiver Luther Burden. That was a lot of preseason hype expectations. Thought that would be a great offensive team coming back, and they really haven't fully clicked yet. There might be some speculation that injury for Luther Burden, why he's not playing kind of 100%, but their first major test, they go on the road to A&M and get blown out by 31. Now you look at the schedule, UMass obviously should be a win. But who knows? Auburn, Alabama, Oklahoma, South Carolina, Mississippi State, I would still say a win, and Arkansas. I looked at that schedule coming in the year. I saw 10-2 at worst. Now I think this is a team that could go 9-3, 8-4, and definitely not make the playoff with that schedule and certainly that record. But even if they go 10-2, who are your good wins really going to be over? Do they beat Alabama? I don't think so, because that's at Alabama. Oklahoma, I think, is overrated. Auburn's been a mess. South Carolina, who knows what team you get when you play them at Mississippi State, and then versus Arkansas. There's a few kind of coin flip games in there, and I just think Missouri hasn't lived up to the hype this year, and I don't really have much confidence as well in them going forward. So Mizzou, one of the most overhyped teams from the offseason, maybe the most overhyped team from the offseason. I think we're starting to learn more and more each and every week. Michigan, point number 5. They are who we thought they were. I talked about it this week where Washington, I thought they had the defensive staff to break down and break this kind of run-first Michigan offense. Alex Orji throws for 15 yards, gets benched for Jack Tuttle, who's played a handful of snaps in his career, is like a 6 or 7 year senior at Michigan. They just have nothing at the quarterback spot. And I do find it interesting, Dave Portnoy at Barstool talking about, he's willing to pay upwards to $3 million a year for Michigan to go get a quarterback from the portal. And that's kind of the day and age we're living in with college football. Good for him, good for them. But that doesn't help them this year and the problems that they're going to continue facing. I think the books certainly indicated that they were in trouble last week, making Washington a favorite in that matchup. You look at the rest of the schedule. At Illinois is not an easy game, especially with the style of play that they play. They're going to be able to stuff this rush first attack. Versus Michigan State, I think Michigan State's been looking kind of stingy, actually. Wouldn't be surprised if that's a game. Versus Oregon's going to be a blowout. I think at Indiana, hell, I think Indiana rolls them in that one. I would take Indiana probably -7 in that game if it came out right now. Versus Northwestern, and then obviously at Ohio State. I think I said this. I think it was after the Texas game. I said this is more of a 7-5 team fighting for bowl eligibility out of 6-6 than a team competing for the playoffs. And going into last week, even they were number 10 in the country, but they were -1,600 to miss the playoffs, plus 800 to make it. Pretty much tells you kind of what everyone at Vegas is thinking about that Michigan team. And you can't win football games in 2024 if you're not able to complete the forward pass. It's plain and simple as that. And I think it's going to be a long rest of the year for Michigan. Going to have to do some major rehauling at the quarterback spot in the portal, or see what they're able to do in recruiting. But you're not going to go far in 2024 playing 1975 football. All right, point number 6. We just talked about them a little bit, but the Indiana freaking Hoosiers are for real in college football. No, we're not talking about Mike Woodson in college basketball. We're talking about Coach Cignetti and the Hoosiers on the gridiron. I mean, this is a team 6-0, the first team in the country to reach bowl eligibility with that 6 win. I believe their win total was 5.5 coming into the year as well. And they hit it in their first 6 games. Good for them. They have the bye this week. Then they host Nebraska. That should be a pretty awesome game between two what looks like upstart programs. Play Washington, very winnable game. At Michigan State, winnable game. Versus Michigan, we just talked about, should win that one. At Ohio State, that's a major test, but they have a legit shot to go into that game at 10-0. Indiana football could be competing for a Big Ten title. And who knows at that point, like 10-0, the magic's there. See what Ohio State's got to offer. And I still think Ohio State's probably a 2-touchdown favorite, at least in that matchup. Maybe by the time we get to it, it's down to like 12, in between 12 and 10, something like that. But man, Indiana football is for real, can just continue to roll. Double-digit win over Northwestern, 41-24. Beat Maryland by 2 touchdowns. Blow out Charlotte, obviously not much there. At UCLA, not a great team. Western Illinois, FIU, but every win this year has been by double digits. And for a pretty new roster, a new head coach, pretty amazing story for Indiana football this year. Number 7, talking a lot of basketball schools, I feel like on the show today, but the Pitt Panthers, another team, are they for real? Like in the ACC, 5-0, another team playing with some magic. I think they've had 2 pretty crazy comeback wins at Cincinnati, 28-27, and versus West Virginia, 38-34. That was another comeback win. But they beat North Carolina this weekend. They beat up on Kent State and Youngstown State as they should, but they're sitting here at 5-0. Games against Cal, Syracuse, SMU, Virginia, Clemson, Louisville. It's a tough way to kind of end and at Boston College, but I'm not pitching and advocating for the Panthers to make the playoffs, but they got a number next to their name now. Let's talk about them. Number 22 in the country, Eli Holstein, has played really good football at the quarterback spot. He's thrown for over 1,500 yards and 5 touchdowns, only 3 interceptions this year. He's a freshman too. So if they're able to keep him, roster retention is one of the main things in this portal era now. The future of Pitt football could look pretty bright. 6th in yards, passing yards per game, and 6 in points for per game as well. So put some respect on the Pitt Panthers name as well. And an ACC that I think is wide open. We talked about it with Syracuse. SMU has looked a lot better as of lately. Hell, Virginia has looked pretty good recently. Clemson has looked awesome since that beatdown against Georgia. Miami's still finding ways to win. I think they're going to be due for a loss, kind of scraped by the skin of their teeth against Cal and Virginia Tech. But it's a wide open SEC. Why not Pitt? Why can't Pitt make a run? You look at that schedule. I'm not looking at any of those games and penciling automatic losses. I think Clemson at this point, you could probably chalk up as a loss at Louisville. Louisville, what are they really still? I don't know, but that's not going to be an easy game. But I could see Pitt being a 9-win team at year's end. And coming into the year, I think expectations were a 3, 4, 5-win team and probably a new head coach come 2025. So hats off to Pitt and kind of eye-opening start to the season, getting out of 5-0, still sitting here undefeated. Number 8, Billy Napier lives to see another day. Good for him. I feel like being an underdog at home to UCF, writing was kind of on the wall there. It seemed like UCF was going to go in there, win, and Billy Napier probably wouldn't be having a job right now at the University of Florida. Is that the win that changes your season? Probably not. You still got a lot of tough games coming up. You have to go to Tennessee now, who's going to be playing pissed off. They're at home in this one as well, coming off that Arkansas loss. Then Kentucky, who's looked resurgent since that loss to South Carolina. Then they played Georgia, obviously, at Texas, LSU, Ole Miss, and at Florida State. Maybe a win there at the end. Billy Napier might not have a job, but hey, who knows? Maybe they're finding their stride, finding their footing. It's an impressive win against a UCF offense that maybe it's kind of gotten figured out early in the season here. I thought that was going to be a really tough rushing offense to cover, but now back-to-back weeks. Colorado and Florida, not exactly world beaters on the defensive side of the ball, have found ways to slow them down and really limit their ability on the ground. So Billy Napier lives to see another day. I kind of penciled in as this for the week for him to get fired, but they pull off the upset win at home over UCF, and here they go. Got another chance this week at Tennessee. We'll see if anything changes. Number 9, another surprise team. This is kind of all ties into our theme and our point number 1 at the beginning, where chaos is here, man. And here we are talking 6 weeks in. First place in the Big 12 at 3-0 is the Texas Tech Red Raiders, sitting there at 5-1 overall, 3-0 in the Big 12. Only loss was at Washington State, who beat Washington, who we saw just beat Michigan. Washington State, pretty solid team to start the year as well. They haven't beat a lot of great teams, but to start off the year, a crazy 52-51 win over Abilene Christian. You're kind of like, oh, it could be a long year for Texas Tech. But then they blow out North Texas by 40. They beat Arizona State, who's sitting there at 4-1 as well, 30-22. Cincinnati, a good game, 44-41. Win at Arizona, 28-22. And who knows? This is the theme of this show, I think, and just the season in general. I'm talking about playoff paths for freaking Texas Tech, Pitt, Syracuse, and Indiana. Like, you came into the year, you weren't penciling any of those teams in any of the conversation. But they play versus Baylor, who's terrible. Dave Aranda might get fired this week if they get blown out in that game. At TCU, who just lost to Houston at home. At Iowa State, that's going to be a tough one. They're looking really good. Colorado, hat tip to Dion. They've looked pretty good to start the year, and I thought they were going to struggle after that North Dakota State game. They're sitting there at 4-1, 2-0 in the Big 12. At Oklahoma State, who's been a dumpster fire, sitting at the bottom there. Them, Baylor, and Kansas, all winless right now in Big 12 play. And then versus West Virginia, what West Virginia team shows up? They're up and down every single week. But hell, I see a path that Texas Tech goes 11-1, 10-2, and they're sitting there in the conversation. Any team that has 1 or 2 losses, especially in these congested conferences, are going to have a chance to all you got to do is make your conference title game, and you could be in the playoff. So look at the Texas Tech Raiders maybe as an outside shot. You get some of these tough games at home, Colorado at home, West Virginia at home. You do have to go to Iowa State and Oklahoma State, which are tough, but you lose one game in Big 12 play, you're probably going to the Big 12 title game. So Texas Tech Red Raiders, hat tip to them. Didn't think we'd be talking about them at all this year. And our last point of the show, we kind of saved this one for a G5 team. Shout out to the UL Monroe Warhawks. We talked about them on the show this week for our preview episode because they were playing James Madison and wanted to talk about James Madison as a potential playoff team out of that G5 spot. But UL Monroe came into the season with a win total projection of 1.5. That means if they got 2 wins, they hit their season over projection. 1 win, obviously, was under. They're sitting here at 4-1 and 2-0 in the Sun Belt. Miracles can happen. I'm not saying this is a playoff team, but hell, the UL Monroe Warhawks with a preseason win total of 1.5 find a way to go to the Sun Belt title game. That is going to be one of the stories of the season. I didn't watch that game on Saturday, but looks like this team plays some damn good defense. They held this James Madison offense that had been on fire to only 19 points. But so far this season, they've held Jackson State to 14, UAB to 6. Texas, they give up 51, 3 loss. Big boy ball there. Troy 13-9, and James Madison 21-19. They haven't played great offense, but they've been finding ways to win games and have been finding ways to upset teams. I mean, James Madison was a 17-point spread in that one, and they're playing some damn good defense. 19 points, 9 points, 6 points, and 14 points in their 4 games against schools not named the University of Texas. Pretty awesome start and pretty awesome story, I think. Underrated story in the college football season thus far. But that'll do it for the Week 6 recap show. We got Holy Grail Week preview coming on Thursday night with Joseph Kometz and I as we break down Texas, Oklahoma, Oregon, Ohio State, Kansas State, Colorado, Florida versus Tennessee. We got a lot of great games to get into, and we have you covered here, as always, at Beef Up Front.